Well, good morning, boys and girls. I woke up in the basement again, so I guess I'm gonna go upstairs and find out what I did wrong this time because I can't remember. It was very rum o'clock last night. Very, very. Anyways, we're on to the Ottawa Senators. And I'm kind of turning this into a trade deadline series. Um, And when it comes to Ottawa, they're an interesting team coming to the trade deadline. They always are because they are a very low budget team. Draft picks are like so incredibly valuable to them. When you're a low budget team, you got to keep them and you got to hit them. So giving up draft picks isn't something that they're going to be looking at doing. I suppose if they figure they got the right piece that's going to win them a round or two, which is going to make them more money, they'd be willing to do so. But let's assume that there's nothing really out there for that, or at least not something that's going to turn their crank. Uh, they are pretty good up front. They're not bad. They're with Stone, Hoffman, Dzingel coming up and doing well this year. Turris, and they've actually got really good depth, at least on the top two lines. Where they do need a little bit of help, and that's the reason why they went out and got a guy like Wingles. If you're going out to get Wingles to add to your depth, your bottom six depth is not very good because he's not bringing much to the table anymore. Um, so they got to be looking in that area, trying to add there. You could probably do that with like a fifth or a sixth round or a fourth round even. Um, but they're where they really need help, especially if they want to be winning at least one round in the playoffs, is their depth after Mathot. They're pretty good, not bad in the top four with Cece and Carlson, Mathot, and somebody else is left my brain here. But their top four is not bad. It's their bottom, Boriecki and guys like that are not really going to cut it in the playoffs. So they're going to need to look at uh, upgrading in that area. One asset that they do have is they're fairly deep up the middle, and they have a guy who's playing third line. Two guys that are playing third line that can probably fill the role: Pajot and Zach Smith. I loathe the idea of getting rid of Zach Smith because I love the guy. But they've tried him on the wing and it's been mixed results. He is pretty much a centerman and they need wingers. Um, so what I was thinking is something like trading him to Phoenix for a guy who hasn't really panned out, but is actually a pretty solid 5'6" in Connor Murphy, and a guy they picked up on the offseason that can play a really good third line role in Brock McGinn. You could maybe get those two guys, and for Zach Smith, you could probably even get a draft pick out of the deal, which Ottawa really needs. I looked elsewhere in the league and what you could get for Zach Smith on D, and the teams that are out of the playoffs, there's not too many that are going to give up any D for for a guy like Zach Smith, because most teams are pretty stacked up the middle with guys like him. Phoenix is the only one I can see that would be able to give you something in return that's relatively decent, and that's not that bad of a it's not that bad of a return for a guy like Zach Smith if you're trying to win a couple rounds. That being said, Murphy has not really panned out great up until now. It does look like he's going to be an HLer, but he's probably going to remain a 5'6". And Brock McGinn is probably a third line winger. And as he gets older, and he's on a short term contract, so you don't know if you're going to get him back. So it's kind of it's really stretching it to get a couple rounds in. Like I said, I don't really like the idea of losing Zach Smith. Pajot is a guy that's pretty replaceable. Unfortunately, I think their best bet is to stand pat and maybe try to add some depth with third or fourth round picks. You've got some really good prospects coming up, especially in Shabbat. That's going to be excellent. White looks good. And there's a couple other guys as well. So be patient. Keep on drafting well. That is going to be your bread and butter. That's hard for the Ottawa Senators because they can't just tank. They don't have the money to tank. People don't come into the seats, and they need every seat they can. So they got to be in the playoff picture every year. Yet they need draft picks to stay alive. Not a very difficult combination. Something I think Murray has did a really good job of. He doesn't get enough credit for like what he did with that Phaneuf trade. That Phaneuf trade was really good. Defensemen are extremely hard to get in the league, and yes, Phaneuf is a little bit overpriced for what he is at $7 million, but he gave up virtually nothing and got himself a top two defenseman, and that's like excellent. That's an excellent thing to do. People in Toronto were saying, "Oh, that's a horrible trade," but it wasn't. It wasn't a horrible trade. They really got shafted. Now they got the cap space that because it was going to hurt them in the long run, so it worked out well for them too. But I say kudos to Murray for that trade. I think it was a really good trade. If you're enjoying my NHL Pearls of Wisdom, as I like to say, tongue in cheek, you can check them out coincidentally, at my NHL Pearls of Wisdom on YouTube. I have many others other than this. You'll find that my predictions are actually fairly accurate. And so if you're in fantasy leagues or whatever like that, you might be able to help you out. And there's a chuckle in there every once in a while as well. By the way, this has been brought to you by Jaime's Body Lube. Jaime's Body Lube for those nights when you're going to end up sleeping in the basement. There, I said it. That's my full 42%, everybody. Have a great day. Lots of love to you.